your entire existence, at the deepest level, in a nutshell. The following description encompasses your entire existence. Everything you are, and everything you experience. There is nothing behind, beyond or outside this. It includes everything. So let's describe your being. Your being consists of two major elements: awareness, and form. That's it. That's all there is. Awareness, and form. Now, the form aspect is of two types. Firstly, the sense fields in their raw form. The five senses. Just as they are. So, obviously vision, which is really one mass of color and shape. And the other sense fields of sound, taste, touch, and smell. So the flow of raw sensory experience is one of the two types of form that make up your being. The only other type of form is something I call the conceptual energy. This is just a fancy name for thought, but I use the term for a reason. That's because the conceptual energy includes everything from the most obvious, or gross, thought, right down to very subtle movements of thought, such as the lightning-fast recognition of objects. Let's explore that more deeply. So first of all, it includes the standard verbal thought we are so familiar with. Like when the voice in your head says, "What a beautiful bird." It also includes all thoughts that imagine things. Like imagining a forest, with all its wonderful sights, sounds, and smells. It also includes the basically invisible movement of logical reasoning, like when you do mathematical calculations. But it also includes a far more subtle energy. The energy that labels all the things experienced in the sense fields. Like when you hear a bird, and a microsecond later, your conceptual energy actually recognizes it as a bird. Okay. So that's the summary of awareness, and form, including the form that is your own conceptual energy. Now let's get into the detail. First of all, let's describe awareness. Or as I call it, awareness in itself. I call it this because we are referring to awareness, just in itself, by itself. We do this so we can understand the qualities of awareness in itself without reference to the five senses or the conceptual energy. Just awareness in itself, by itself. Awareness in itself is your core essence. It is a simple knowingness, or witness, that is utterly formless and contentless. Empty. As the Buddhists say. Like space. It's like an invisible energy field that simply knows. Like a mirror, it reflects everything perfectly, choicelessly and without bias. A famous Buddhist phrase says that awareness is nothing at all, and yet, it knows. It experiences. And of course what it experiences is form. The five senses, and the conceptual energy. So that's awareness in itself. Your most fundamental self. So, what about the other half, so to speak, of your existence? Form. Let's be more precise in describing what form is. How do we define form really well? The best way is to say the following. Form includes everything, absolutely everything, in your existence that is not awareness in itself. It's that simple. Anything that is not awareness is form. More specifically, form is anything with content, characteristics, change. In fact, everything, not just in our experience, but in all of existence, is also only awareness and form. So, if we move away for a moment from looking at our direct experience, and look at the whole universe from the conventional, or you could say, third-person, point of view, what do we see? Even then, we have only awareness and form. In the whole universe, we have only awareness and form. There are beings, and they are made up of awareness, and the form that is conceptual energy. And all the rest of the universe is only form. Including the bodies of beings, the stars and planets, the mass of nature on those planets, and everything else. It's all form. Okay, so going back to our own being, / entire existence. As I said, The form we experience is of two types: the sense fields and the conceptual energy. But here's where it gets interesting, and can provide you with powerful insight that can be incredibly useful in your life. This form side of your being, so to speak, exists as two, basically separate, dimensions, domains, realms. Imagine your existence, your entire being, as an onion. The empty core of the onion is awareness in itself. The sense fields and the conceptual energy are like two different layers or skins around that empty core, each independent of the other. Of course, we have to point out that this metaphor isn't perfect. It's only useful in describing the functional independence of all three elements from each other: awareness, the senses, the conceptual energy. In reality, awareness pervades everything. Awareness pervades the flow of the six types of energy: the conceptual energy and the sense fields. They are utterly infused with awareness, with living, effulgent consciousness. In fact, you could say awareness is expressed as the flow of form. So what is so important to know about the sense fields and their relationship to the conceptual energy? It is this. When we talk about the sense fields, the flow of color, shape, sound, taste, smell and sensation, we mean the sense fields in their raw form. That is, the raw flow of sensory experience, prior to its differentiation into different objects, into different things. The raw flow of, say, sound, before you differentiate it into different blobs of stuff, different things, objects. Before you select out a segment of the raw flow of sound and label it as a particular thing. Before you, rather arbitrarily, select a couple of seconds of that flow of sound and assign it a human label. A very good example of raw sensory experience is the chirp of a bird, before you even recognize it as a bird, before you in fact differentiate it, label it as a bird, before you somewhat arbitrarily choose a segment of that one flow of sound and say, that is a bird. So what is it that actually performs that differentiation? That labeling? You guessed it. The conceptual energy. The conceptual energy is the psychic energy that recognizes that the raw sound of the bird is a so-called bird. Or, to be more accurate, it is the conceptual energy that responds to the raw flow of sensory experience by differentiating out segments of it and giving those segments names, labels. As an aside, you can now understand precisely what the Buddhists mean when they use the phrase, name and form. Here form has a slightly different meaning to the way we are using it. But it's a useful phrase anyway. Form refers to the raw flow of the senses. Name refers to the labeling which makes up so much of the flow of the conceptual energy. So, this object labeling is the very foundation of all thought. If you look at any thought at all, you will soon see that it always refers to some object. You cannot think without thinking about an object, a thing. Things, objects, are like the currency of thoughts. So, you have just labeled a segment of the flow of sound, a bird. What can now follow is an infinite variety of thoughts, based on that initial apparent object. All sorts of thoughts about the bird. All sorts of thoughts about other things related to the bird. These thoughts are really just claims about that segment of the flow of reality that you have labeled the bird. So, let's summarize the conceptual energy. Its very basis is object labeling. That is the lightning fast, subtle movement of energy that differentiates, that selects out a specific segment of the sensory flow and designates that segment as a specific object, such as bird. By the way, it's important to note, objects also include forces. Really, any force we could talk about is just another segment of the sensory flow that the conceptual energy has differentiated out and assigned a made-up name to. Then, From that basic object differentiation comes all the grosser thought. That includes a few things. It obviously includes all of our verbal thought. The voice in the head. All of it, referring to objects. Every last bit of it. Then there's imagination. Our imagination can create a rough copy of anything we experience, in the flow of the five senses. We can imagine the sound of a bird, what it looks like, the feeling of its feathers, its smell, and of course we can imagine things that have never actually been experienced as the five senses. Like, say, a unicorn. But which must have been derived from things that have been experienced in the past. It goes without saying that this inner recreation that I am giving the general label of imagination, also includes memories, and dreams. Finally we have non-verbal reasoning, such as mathematical calculation, and while doing this the conceptual energy seems to be virtually invisible. But again, it's important to remember that all of these manifestations of your conceptual energy are always derived from objects. Objects are the currency of conceptual energy. This is significant because in other teachings about the facets of being we show that those posited objects in no way represent definitive truth. Once we start mentally dealing with an object, we do so in a way that often unconsciously assumes the object has a few particular qualities. Particular qualities objects do not, in fact, have. We deal with the object, in thought, as though it is solid or permanent. But actually, no object ever is. We deal with it as though it is separate and independent from the surrounding energy. Yet, nothing is. As though it were unitary rather than easy to break up. Again, not so. The supposed unitary object can actually be broken up into an infinite number of pieces, which you could then call other objects. Is it still the same object, then? Was it, truly, ever one unitary object? No, it was not. It was only nominally unitary. The famous example of this given in the teachings is, a chariot. Is a chariot still a chariot when it is broken down into its wheels, its axle, its carriage, its shaft and so on? What about when each of those things is further broken down? You soon see that thinking treats the flow of reality as a bunch of separate, unitary objects. When, in fact, that flow does not actually conform to being a bunch of objects that are truly unitary, or separate, or independent, or solid, at all. Thought also deals with objects as though they have objective reality. As though it's possible to know a thing objectively. But this requires that the object has the same exact form, no matter how it is viewed. But there are no such objects in the entire universe. That's because the actual form of the object will vary according to many factors. For a start, objects are always viewed through the awareness of individual beings. Already this means they are experienced through different bodies. Does a fly see exactly the same object as you? How about an elephant? The objects are also experienced from different positions in space. And in different conditions such as available light. And many other factors that influence the way the object is actually experienced. And not only that, all of these factors also vary over time. Even over a few seconds. So there is no one version of any object. There are, in fact, trillions of versions of even one single object in the world. Amazing. If a tree falls in the forest, and nobody hears it, did it really fall? All these limitations of the always object-based conceptuality point to the need to find a better way to gain knowledge about form. Thankfully, being provides one. As we will see below, there is one more thing to know about the conceptual energy. Where it comes from. It's not out of thin air. The conceptual energy actually arises out of awareness in itself. It is created, so to speak, by awareness in itself. But the conceptual energy is secondary to the awareness. This is rather like the sun, and a sun flare. The sun flare springs forth from the sun but is a secondary creation of it. Awareness transcends both the sense fields and its own conceptual energy. It is the mere unchanging witness of all form. Awareness in itself is the overarching, all-encompassing, all-pervading, unaffected, unbiased witness of all form. Awareness is the host, form is the guest. Okay, shortly I will finish by explaining why all of your being is perfect. Why it could not be improved even if you redesigned it from scratch. But before I do, let me give you one final metaphor that captures the relationship between the big three: the awareness, the conceptual energy and the sense fields. An evocative metaphor for your conceptual energy to grok. Imagine a special mirror that was not only able to reflect everything, but could also react to whatever it is reflecting. And it does this by displaying colorful pictures within the glass of the mirror, like a swirling, ever-changing hologram. So, for example, the mirror might be reflecting a bird. Then, within the glass of the mirror, arises the holographic commentary on the reflection. The first thing the conceptual energy would probably do is project a lightning-fast flash of energy that simply labels the reflection bird, bird, bird. Then, it might perhaps project a copied image of that bird, or at least the best copy the conceptual energy can manage. Or perhaps it manifests as the image of a different bird. Or even just the sentence, "That's a nice bird." In fact, there are endless possibilities of what the conceptual energy could manifest, based on its past conditioning. The holographic pictures that are the conceptual energy are superimposed on top of the reflections, and of course, experienced within the mirror. And you should have noticed that the holographic pictures are also reflected in the mirror equally as the sense experiences are. The mirror doesn't discriminate between reflecting senses or reflecting the holographic commentary. It reflects it all choicelessly without prejudice. So, in this metaphor, the mirror is awareness in itself. The reflections are the sense fields. The hologrammic pictures are the conceptual energy. Of course, this is a limited metaphor, because in reality, 1. The awareness in itself, the basic reflecting capacity of the mirror, does not actually respond. The response is only the conceptual energy, the hologrammic pictures. Awareness does nothing but simply experience the 5 sense flows and the flow of conceptual energy, directly, completely, with perfect clarity, and non-dually. 2. In reality, the conceptual energy is far more than pictures. As I said, it can manifest, for example, as internal representations of any of your senses. Sight, sound, taste, touch or smell. Including sound, as the voice in your head. It also manifests as abstract, seemingly invisible reasoning, such as when you perform mathematical calculations. So, what about the great perfection of being? Ultimately, it would be hard to call the nature and structure of being anything but perfect. Your core essence, awareness, is utterly pure, because it is empty of any content in itself. It's like empty space. It's also all-pervading. It pervades your entire existence. It infuses all your experience. There is nothing beyond it, outside of it, or behind it. You are it. It is all of you. It is, in fact, the whole universe for you. It also transcends everything, all form. It is unchangeable. No matter what form arises within it, no matter what form flows through it, no form can damage or change it. Nothing can damage its capacity and function of just directly experiencing. Just directly experiencing the flow of form. The flow of the senses and the conceptual energy. And non-dually too. The deepest level of enlightenment reveals that really, awareness is expressed as form. Awareness itself is expressed as the flow of the 6 types of form energy. Awareness can, temporarily, be whatever form it is experiencing. It temporarily takes on the form it experiences. No wonder it is so difficult to delineate awareness in itself from form. Imagine the metaphor of a transparent crystal ball placed on a blue surface. The crystal ball appears as blue. It is infused with blue. It is blue. Temporarily. In the same way, awareness appears as the forms it is experiencing. There is no separation at all. An even better metaphor for the non-duality of awareness and form is fire. Awareness is like the substance of fire itself, the heat or fieriness itself. And form is like the ever-changing shape of the flames. So when I use the term being, I ultimately mean awareness and form as an utterly non-dual unity. Being is one fire, continually morphing and playing. A wondrous display of infinite variety. There is only one time when awareness is not expressed as form. This in itself is a very special thing about the way being can be. When death occurs, the body, and the world, drop out of awareness in itself. The flow of the senses dissolves. Then, at least for a short time, even the conceptual energy dissolves. So then, awareness experiences only itself, by itself. Awareness experiences only awareness. So, of course, it is utterly formless. It experiences itself as a vast space of all-pervading, incredibly refined peace and bliss. Incredibly rarefied peace and bliss. Like a vacuum. Nirvana. This is the name given to this absolute baseline experience of being, by the Buddhists. And the original Buddhist teachings tried to teach people how to remain in this state to escape all suffering, forever. This is because nirvana is the only situation beyond the reach of all conditions, all form. The Hindus also try to realize this effulgent ground of being, and they call it the self. The Christian mystics and the Sufis also tried to realize union with this luminous potentiality for all things. But the evidence of this great blissful living void comes not just from meditators, but from those who have temporarily died and returned, near-death experiencers. It has also been experienced by many who have used entheogens, such as 5-MeO-DMT, or even the more well-known so-called NN-DMT. So that is the very baseline of awareness in itself, and therefore, being. But of course, that is not how we spend most of our existence. When awareness is in contact with any realm, and therefore contacts form, it becomes, that form, non-dually, wondrous. The final thing that makes awareness perfect, is that, awareness is also the same in every single being, and not just humans. All beings in the universe. How could it be otherwise? So, awareness in itself is perfect. But what is it about form that is also perfect? What's perfect about the flow of the five senses and the conceptual energy? First, the senses. The raw flow of color, shape, sound, touch, taste and smell. Or if you are a bee, or a butterfly, or an earthworm or platypus or octopus, then also the senses of chemical perception or the perception of magnetic fields or electricity. What's perfect about the senses, separate from the conceptual energy? The raw sensory flow is perfect because it provides us with the one truth about form that we can totally rely on. And therefore the only reliable truth about everything in existence apart from awareness. About the entire universe. It provides us with the only definitive knowledge about form that there is. In fact, the raw flow of the five senses is the ultimate truth of form. Just in itself, just as it is the ultimate truth. The flow of raw color, shape, sound, touch, taste and smell, just as itself, is the only, perfectly, reliable truth about form available in the universe. What is present in the present is undeniable. It is just there, utterly clear, just in itself. Suchness. As they say in Zen, this is it. The raw sound of the bird's chirp, before the conceptual energy can even claim it is a thing called a bird. Remember, everything you experience must enter through the gateway of your awareness. Everything happens within the room that is you. You as awareness are the host, form is the guest. So when the bird chirp appears as awareness, there is nothing behind it. That is all of reality. The raw sound, just as it is. That's ultimate reality. The perfect reliable reality, of form. So the only definitive truth, but also the perfect truth, of form is just this. The raw presentation, of the five senses, necessarily prior to conceptuality, just as they appear, in this present moment. Or simply the raw bird chirp you hear in the present moment, before you think it's a bird. The unalloyed presentation of the five senses is therefore perfect. And finally, we have the conceptual energy. Without the conceptual energy we would only have awareness and the raw flow of the five senses, just as it is. We would be a bit like a TV, rather than a computer. Able to experience the five senses, but unable to input anything at all, to feed anything back into the world. Unable to even differentiate out a single object. Unable to interpret even one experience, one segment of the flow of the senses. Unable to take even one action. The conceptual energy is the very thing that allows us to interpret and comment on the world, participate in the world, influence the world and enjoy the world more, by virtue of the presentations of the colorful, creative conceptual energy itself. The conceptual energy is both an incredible tool, and a wild entertainment just in itself. Its perfection is that it manifests as an infinite creative variety that can never be solidified, stopped or even defined. The conceptual energy can of course take any segment of the sensory flow we just talked about. And it can label that segment as an object. And from then on it can work with that object in many, many ways, creating everything from science, to art and literature, to even romantic love. What a wonder! Those who would have us try to get rid of the conceptual energy in some way do not understand the incredible gift that it is. Given that it can never capture the ultimate truth of form in the same way that the raw presentation of the senses does, the conceptual energy is a poor master. But it is an awesome servant. Awareness in itself. The raw flow of the senses. The conceptual energy. These three together make up being. And being is a creative fire. A divine shapeshifter. An ongoing colorful present moment explosion of non-dual divine energy. Indeed, my friend, being, is an endless, infinite cavalcade of entertainment, for all beings. Regardless of what one's conceptual energy may claim from time to time. Its structure. Its relationships. Its dynamics. Are perfect. This presentation has been brought to you by Aaron Dorje, the creator of the schema of the nature of reality, known as the Facets of Being. May all beings attain all the enlightenments that directly, experientially reveal to them this very nature in all its aspects. Your entire existence, at the deepest level,